The NBA is super proud of their rule changes they made last year, and they're here to stay. Good news for one Jazz player, bad news for another. Next on Locked On Jazz. Bum 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 bum.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider, and this is Locked On Jazz. On today's show, I just got back from the NBA broadcast meeting, and one thing was very, very clear to me. The NBA is super proud of the rule changes they made around All-Star break last year, and that's the way the league is going to be called this next year, and it's a dramatic change, and it vastly impacts one of our players in a good way, and another, it's going to be interesting to see, maybe in a not-so-good way. So we'll break that down. Plus, Tim Lacomb back with us on the show today. We'll talk about what player he thinks the season is most important for, and we disagree on who that is. Plus, we'll look around a little bit of the Western Conference and some other Jazz aspects as well. As I mentioned, I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked On Jazz. It is your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time. Today's episode, download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first episode. Thank you for making Locked On Jazz your first listen. And thank you to the everydayers out there who join us each and every day. Please subscribe or follow. We're still under 50% of our YouTube watchers being subscribers. So please hit subscribe and hit that bell button as well. All right. Around late January, I think the date's January 22nd, the NBA sends a memo out to the league that says basically, we're not calling the games right. Frankly, the offense is out of control. We've got to stop this. And they literally changed the rules, in my opinion, halfway through the year last year. I think it's a bit outrageous. I said at the time, it's over. Let's not litigate it. But I thought it was kind of crazy. So things that were a foul for the first half of the season became a non-foul for the second half of the season. That's simply it. And it had a dramatic impact. So prior to February 1st, the offensive rating in the league average was a 116.3. Following February 1st, and I think if I go to the All-Star break, I actually think it would be more dramatic, but the sample size gets super small. And so I chose to do kind of the February 1st because I think the memo went out January 22nd and it kind of felt like it started to happen there. But and if you do the All-Star break, it's literally a 2-point per 100 possession change from what the offense was in the first 52 games to what it was in the last 30 of the NBA season. 2 points per 100 possessions. You have a hard time going year to year in NBA history and finding a difference of 2 points. I mean, a dramatic change. And the change was that we stopped calling fouls. It's literally what happened. We stopped calling fouls. So you can look at how many free throws does a team take per 100 field goals. And the league average was 20, and the league average dropped to 17.8. Okay? They stopped calling fouls. And they stopped calling fouls on drives to the basket. I just left the NBA meetings, and they explained to us literally what they were doing. And basically, the rule is if a player gets an advantage, they have a straight line that they're able to maintain that they cannot be knocked off of, or it's a foul. But what was happening was players were getting an advantage, and then they were taking more of the advantage into that lane, into the defender by ducking into them once they had the advantage, and that was being called a foul. And at times, the player didn't actually all the way have the advantage, and that was being called a foul. But now it is very clear in their minds of what they're calling. If a player jabs right, gets a little advantage, goes left, has a lane down the basket. Think about it. You're top of the free throw line. I jab right because I'm going to get the advantage doing this. I jab right. I now swing through to the left. My defender stepped. I have the edge. I have a step, and I'm now on the straight line of the free throw line. That's my line. If I veer in and make contact, I'm not getting the foul call. If I get bumped off that line to the left, I get the foul call. Okay? That's the rule. Straight line. And they changed it, and they're super happy with it. And they're probably right. I like the rule change now. I didn't like it in the middle of the season. I thought it questioned the competitive balance of the season. So it changed dramatically. 2 points per 100 possessions. And we went from 20 free throws per 100 possessions to 17.8. So I went and looked at where did it impact the game. If you look at pick and roll offense, there was almost no difference. 0.989 to 0.98. Almost no difference. In fact, on non-direct pick and rolls, 1.009 to 1.009, absolutely no difference. The difference was entirely on drives. The league average pre-February 1st on drives was 1.03 points per drive. 1.03 points per drive. After February 1st, and again, it would probably be worse if I went to February 14th because they really dug in after the All-Star break. It was 1.00. So 0.03 points per drive. That doesn't sound like that much, but then if you start to think about the fact that Colin Sexton had 454 drives post All-Star break in 28 games, it's a lot. It's a point or two. So who on the Utah Jazz does this impact the most? The drive game is what was changed. And the answer is Keyonte George. Keyonte George, prior to February 1st, was in the 49th percentile of all drive efficiency, right in the middle of the pack of the league. Pretty awesome for a rookie. At 1.025 points per drive. And after February 1st, Keyonte slipped from, listen to this closely, from 1.025 points per drive to 0.944 points per drive. A dramatic drop of nearly 0.1 points per drive. And when you consider he's driving 10, 15 times a game, that's huge. Keyonte George, before the rule change, was in the 49th percentile of all drivers, right in the middle of the pack. And after that, he was in the 32nd percentile. Got more physical. Couldn't work himself. Has to have the shake. One of the questions I think we have on Keyonte still is, he has explosion. Does he have a shake? Can he beat people to get that line to the basket? We're going to find out. So Keyonte was the one that was most affected of any of the Jazz players. Colin Sexton went from 82nd percentile in drive efficiency to 77th. Immaterial. He was literally kind of off on the league average. Jordan Clarkson went from the 55th in league average in drive to 56th. Exactly the same. And Lauri Markkanen got better after February 1st. Now, he drove much less because there was fewer games, and because of the fact that he didn't play all of them. But he went from 1.06 points per drive to 1.13 points per drive. And he went from the 68th percentile to the 88th percentile. Now, this is super interesting because Lauri's size and strength on a drive may mean that he is less bothered by the physical play that the league is now allowing, as it doesn't legislate nearly as much as it was prior. It also might be that Lauri only drives when he knows he has an advantage. And he's not one who has a wiggle or has a lot of different moves to it. So therefore, he wasn't taking advantage of the rules prior. And instead, if he got an edge, he just beat you and went. And now that's what the rule change really allows. John Collins, by the way, just wasn't particularly strong either way. He was in the 14th percentile on drives prior and 20th percentile, or previous and 20th percentile post. So what does this mean? The league is very pleased. That was clear in the meetings that I was in, of the change in the way they legislated the game post All-Star break last year. And that will be the way it will be played this season as well. That you will have far fewer fouls called on drives to the basket than were in the first half of last season. And it will be much more like what we saw in the second half of the season. From an offensive standpoint, this bothered Keyonte George a great deal Now, it also might have been that that's the part of the season where he played less with Lauri, less with John Collins, less with Jordan Clarkson, and had a larger burden on him and was fatiguing simultaneously to the league suddenly making it more difficult to drive to the basket. Not a great combination for a 19-year-old rookie. But it will be interesting to watch Keyonte's early season drive success and see whether or not he's able to figure out how to play with this physicality with some more knowledge, and the change that he got midway through the change of his rookie season, which had to be totally brutal. Play 40 games thinking you had one thing, and then all of a sudden it's something else. It had to be totally brutal. For Lauri Markkanen, this might be where his size and strength gives him a massive advantage. And frankly, for Colin Sexton, that first step is so flippin' awesome that I don't think it really matters because he's just beating guys and getting the edge. So really interesting to see him, something for us to keep an eye on. Tim Lacomb is joining us coming up. What player on the Jazz is this season most important for? Pretty darn interesting question we'll discuss with Timmy Lacomb coming up here on today's show for you. Today's show is brought to you by my friends over at Murdoch Hyundai. I was going through old notes on the plane. I'm actually moving off Evernote. For anyone who's using Evernote, they know why. And I found the very first meeting I ever had with Murdoch Hyundai with Blake and his family, and it took place in 2017, in March of 2017. The Murdochs and Locked On and Hyundai have been together for 7 years. And it's been my honor to represent and tell you about the Murdochs because they have been such great people to all of our Locked On Jazz listeners. And in that time, I've bought 3 Hyundais, so it's clear I enjoy the brand. It has been an absolute dream of a partnership for me in those 7 years because of the fact that every single one of our listeners who've gone over to Murdoch and gotten the VIP experience have been treated fabulously. And that's the no regrets promise that Blake and Tyson and Ben give you at the part of the Murdoch family in their 80 years in Utah. And the Hyundai car is just absolutely fabulous, whether it's the new Palisade or the rockin' new Santa Fe or the Santa Cruz. Check it all out. The Ioniq 5 and 6 are the electric cars, and love both of them very, very much. It's all at Murdoch Hyundai. If you're going to go over there, let's give you the VIP treatment. Email me first at dlock09@gmail.com. Speaking of longtime sponsors, Steve Carter and Intercap Lending may be 7 years deep in as well. I think Brock and the crew maybe at 6. But Steve Carter is another one. And this is, I think if for those of you guys who listen to this show and are everydayers, we don't float around with a lot of different sponsors. We have our crew, the Murdochs, Intercap, occasional others. The store was with us for a while. We had some fun with our guys down at Shamrock Auto for a while. There haven't been a lot of sponsors to the show. We get the people we like, we love. They're part of our family, and they stay, and they're part of yours too. And that's why what Intercap is doing right now is so great. Intercap has rolled out an incredible new program if you're building a home. It's a game changer. Their new construction loan program, you can defer all your interest payments during the construction phase. You heard that right. No payments until your house is ready. They offer flexible underwriting to cater to your unique financial situation, make it easier for you to get approved. And speaking of approval, their quick decision-making process means that on average, you get approval in 3 to 4 weeks. That's practically unheard of in the industry. And guess what? Their loan offers up to as much as $3 million. So finding you the flexibility to build the home of your dreams without financial constraints. If you're ready to turn on your dream home into reality, click on Intercap Lending's check out Intercap Lending's new construction loan program and give Steve Carter a call at 385-800-8528 or email me directly at dlock09@gmail.com and I'll get you connected to Steve Carter and Intercap Lending. Day 2 with our good friend Tim Lacomb, radio analyst on the pre-halftime post-game shows, the coach. We ended the conversation the other day, you freezing in a very Zen-esque position, saying that the player you were most interested in seeing was Keyonte George. Who's the player who the season is most important for?
I bet you guessed the same one as I.
Actually, I'm going different than you. I think I have a different one. I'm going to guess you. I know where I think you're going.
Where am I going?
You're going Walker Kessler.
Yes, you know me, man. It's been 30 plus years. You know me. Yes, Walker Kessler.
I'm not going Walker Kessler.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you why I'm going Walker, and you can tell me what you think. But Studying Walker's season last year, and you and I have a lot of talk about this during the summer here and there. But, I thought Walker last year, no other way to say it, was a sophomore slump. And, I think that why did it happen? I go back and look at it, and I do believe last year, just the situation itself. And, I just don't know if it was all the way fair to him. He really had such a dynamic first year. We were all over the moon with his ability to affect the offense as a defensive player, affect the offense similar to a way we saw a guy do it for, elite way here for a long time. And we saw sprouts of that with Walker that first year. And then, second year, like right from the beginning, it just didn't jive. Obviously that rotation of he and Collins and Markkanen was clunky. And the way that Will wanted to play, just didn't lend itself to that group being very fruitful in the beginning, which led to Walker going to the bench, coming off the bench. And, again, you got to do what you got to do. I said that in the show yesterday, but I think it's the coaches have a tough job. You have to make what you feel like is the best decision and go with it. But in hindsight, that probably hurt Walker's confidence, probably hurt his ability to develop and grow. But the way he handled this summer, the way he kind of hit the ground running, he played that summer league game with so much energy. It reminded me of his rookie year. That I'm going to say this is really important for him because I think he's on that line. He'll always be in the league. I think he's got that talent. But is he going to be one of those guys that people talk about? And so I think if the Jazz are going to be what they want to be, they got to have a guy like that. And so I think this is a big year for both Walker and I think it's a big year for the Jazz and Walker.
So I have two theories on Walker. I have a bunch of thoughts on Walker. One is I've always said this about players year one to year two. So they come in the league in year one and they can do a bunch of stuff and there's a bunch of stuff they can't do. And then they go on the offseason, they work on the stuff they can't do. And they come back in their second year and they still can't do it because the league's too good. It wasn't because they weren't good. It's because the league's too good. So then between year two and year three, they go work on the things they're good at and they get better at them. And those are the things that are going to make their career. So that's where Walker is. So he's going to work on being a better rebounder, offensive rebound putbacks, hopefully a little bit of a post game, forget about the 3-point shooting, hopefully, forget about the mid-range shooting, hopefully, and be a defensive force. That's it. My guy is Taylor. And the other one I would say on Walker, just the Olympic thing was a bust. You go through all of training camp playing with John Collins. We get into the season early. The John Collins thing isn't working. He gets hurt and then gets benched. Really for nothing that was truly his fault, I don't think. So at that moment, it's I thought he got sour, but I'm not sure I hate that he got sour, frankly. He's 22 years old and he got benched for something he didn't think was his fault coming off an Olympics, which was crappy, and he got sour. I kind of like he got sour. We can't complain that Walker's soft and he got sour. They don't go together, at least in my book, right? One means he gives a crap and the other means he doesn't. So they can't go together. So I don't mind it. All right, my guy's Taylor.
Okay.
He's got to play. And he's got to play well. We can't get 2 years into this thing and suddenly be below normal minutes on a ninth pick of a draft. It's at some point the development really has to start and be seeing signs of it and be a player. I just did this on a show recently. You start digging into guys that are 2 years into the league, that are top 15 picks that don't play in their first 2 years. You don't find guys that make it.
Right.
So my biggest one this season is Taylor.
What was your take on his summer?
Maybe not the setting by which he could do his thing.
Yeah.
So maybe take less if that's possible. Now, all right, let's be just totally transparent. I get called a homer all the time. Yeah, probably take less because he didn't do if he had been dominant and crossed over and suddenly been driving and doing all sorts of crazy stuff and showing a different side of who he is as a player, then we're not takeless. We're through the moon. But as he is right now as a player, I don't know that I think Summer League was a place where he was going to leave an impression on me. And so I think it was just a piece of the puzzle for him. And yeah, I just, he's got to really earn himself 24 to 30 minutes a night on the floor of viable basketball, not given. Like he's got to force his way. He's got to force Will Hardy to play him 24 to, and by the way, if he starts to play 30 minutes a night, it's a problem for Will Hardy. Because what is he doing with John Collins and Walker Kessler and Lauri Markkanen and Cody? But that's what we need. We need Taylor to force Will Hardy into a problem of 24, 30 minutes a night.
And it's interesting because I don't think Taylor's at the point where, like you talked about Cody, and his ability to kind of take that ball down the lane line, left-hand dunk before anybody knew what was going on. Really, in fairness to Taylor, like what I would love to see him do is just become a dead-eye catch-and-shoot three-point shooter. You know what I mean? Seriously, if he can bring what he brings on the defensive side, and with minutes, we're going to see more of that. Because what stood out to me coming into the league watching him was how good he is on the ball, regardless of size of the defender. Like he's a switchable 1 through 5 guy. The other thing that I was really enamored with was his ability off the ball to really impact the play. So, whether he's in help or whether he's coming, late to block a shot, that's where he really excelled. And so you're going to see more of that stuff in extended minutes. But I don't think he's ever going to be one of those dudes, or not ever, but I don't think he's ready to be one of those dudes that's just going to like wow you with an elite off the bounce play or something like that. But what I would love him to do is become, like I said, just a knockdown three-point shooter and a guy you can count on defensively in the right spot. And I think, that will free up his confidence, and then he can probably do a little bit more off the bounce.
I mean, it's interesting. Let's get into Will Hardy year 3 here, because I think this relates to it. It's clear from Summer League that Will Hardy wants to play 5 out. And I do think that, probably if you count Jokic at the elbow and Embiid at the elbow as 5 out, they're not really. They're kind of 4.5 out. But they are leaving the cutting lanes behind the free throw line open, which is a huge premise of 5 out. So driving lanes and cutting lanes are open. I do think that we're going to be at something like 25 of the 30 teams playing 5 out. It's obviously Minnesota's not playing 5 out with Rudy. Dallas is not playing 5 out with Lively. You decide what you think about Denver and Philadelphia. I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody.
They're 5 out-ish.
Right, they're 5 out-ish. New York can't play 5 out with Mitchell Robinson, nor does Tom Tebow probably want to play 5 out. So that's about it. And so Will's following the trend and wants to play 5 out, which means for the 2 guys we've both talked about, Walker Kessler and Taylor Hendricks, they're going to have to play with the ball in their hands. They're going to have to execute handoffs. They're going to have to execute screens. That's offensively. And then occasionally they're going to have to fake the handoff, turn the corner, and get on top of the cup. Mm-hmm. That's going to be, and that's reading and reacting and understanding. That's going to be interesting for those 2 guys.
It really is. And you hit it on the head. That is really 5 out in general is a read and react. It's coming out hard to get a ball off a handoff. Your guy's overplaying, you back cut it. Big, smart enough, dump that little pocket pass off for a backdoor. Or, the physicality of the handoff game, being a big, having to hold that ball, guards running through. It's a very physical part of that game. So, yeah, there is nuance extraordinaire in that 5 out that those guys have got to learn. And then, with 5 out, everybody wants all 5 guys to be able to shoot the 3. To your point, back to Walker, my esteemed colleague Jake Scott's like, can we just start with free throws? let's just make sure we're good there, and then move out. So yeah, I think everybody gets enamored by 5 out meaning being able to shoot the 3, but there is way more to it than that.
We'll talk more about Will Hardy year number 3. How do the other pieces, John Collins, Jordan Clarkson, what about Patty Mills, Drew Eubanks, Sky Mihailouk, how do they all fit into the Utah Jazz? We'll talk about those things. Plus, what are the mysteries of the Western Conference before we wrap up the week with Tim Lacomb here on Locked on Jazz. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at BetterHelp. When you're thinking about therapy, there's a lot of hurdles to jump to make it. First, are you willing to do it? Second, how do I do it? Well, BetterHelp will help you with the first part. The second part, it's convenient, it's flexible. It's online therapy. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedonnba to get started. Now, should you do it? That's obviously up to you. I view it as something that is performance enhancing. We run, we lift, we read, we do all these other things for performance enhancement. This is the same concept. So when you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. You just fill out a brief questionnaire. You get matched to a licensed therapist. You switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedonnba today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonnba. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonnba. Today's show is also brought to you by FanDuel, official sportsbook of Locked On. Football season is here, and FanDuel's got things for you. Let's start with a pretty interesting deal for you. Between now and September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get 3-week free trial on NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with YouTube Base Plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season game, Sunday afternoon, or out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and current form of payment. You cancel at any time. And that's not enough. Be sure to check out FanDuel's Profit Boost in the app. Use FanDuel's double your winnings for every Sunday. 9:15 pregame money bet lines. Profit Boost will be starting. It has started already for you. So make sure you jump on that 9 pregame money betting lines on Sunday. So view your account page to learn more about Boost. Visit FanDuel.com to look at and see what's going on. FanDuel.com and get your FanDuel Profit Boost. Tim Lacomb is back with us. Will Hardy, year 3 is different. How?
Wow. Will Hardy, year 3 is different how? Well, he's got 2 years behind him. And, you know, that first year, we've all talked about it, but what I would say, David, to that is the one thing I'm really encouraged about with Will is in 2 vastly different situations, difficult situations, and situations where actually everybody kind of wanted him to lose. He got those 2 teams in year 1 and year 2 playing very, very good basketball at a certain point for an extended period of time, which speaks to, you know, I think what Will does great is block out a lot of the noise and focus on the task at hand. I think what I'd love to try to know behind the scenes is just how difficult it is to continue to try to take an organization forward as a coach, develop these young players that you've got a myriad of, you know, you've got so many young players. And all the while, you know, try to stay in a range of losing that's going to put you in a position to get the bounty that looks to be, you know, the 2025 class. So all those things, you know, when people say, well, Hardy doesn't do this, Hardy doesn't do that, I think Hardy does a pretty good job of managing all of that. And I thought he was comfortable in his skin his first year. So I don't know that any of that changes, but I think more than anything, the more you do something, your podcast, I mean, I watch you whip through this, you know, and it's a lot of reps. It's a lot of familiarity with how this thing works, and coaching's no different. But I think the one thing you have to have as a coach, you have to have belief in what you're doing. You gotta really believe that deep down. And I sense from Will that he is a guy like that. So what I would see is maybe, if anything, a little bit more patience with some of the young guys. I think that might be just a necessity, because you look down, everybody on that bench is pretty young. And that is going to be one of the things I think will continue to grow with Will. But I wouldn't expect too much different in year 3.
I mean, I think you talked about, I see we may be talking about the same thing, but I see the struggle this year as he fundamentally believes no free minutes, which I think we all believe. And maybe this is the same thing. But if he fundamentally believes no free minutes, and at the same time, if you were to ask me the single most important thing for this year, it would be to know about 7 young players and who they are before you have 3 first-round draft picks next season. How do you do those 2 things? The answer might be as simple as, I'm giving no free minutes, so if they don't earn minutes, we know. Okay, that's fair. But yeah, we do need to know about Walker Kessler, Bryce Sensabaugh, Taylor Hendricks, Keyonte George, Cody Williams, Isaiah Collier, and Kyle Filipowski to the best that's possible by June of next year with 3 first-round draft picks again.
100%. And so therein lies the challenge. And so when everybody sits up and double, the questions all the different moves, that's what I tried to explain all year last year on the show was this is like plate tectonics. This is not, if you could just operate in a vacuum in the NBA, but everything's in flux constantly. And you have to work to be relevant, but in the process of working to be relevant, sometimes you got to take a step back. You got to maybe, do some things that perhaps you wouldn't do otherwise, but that's what makes this a challenge. And like I said, I think Will has handled it brilliantly. And from just a basketball perspective, your goal as a coach is to get your team playing optimally. And both years, I feel like he's done that.
100%. How do Jordan Clarkson and John Collins fit into this?
That's another big head scratcher because the NBA, I sat and kind of watched the last few years, and it is so different than anything I was used to in college. But there's a pecking order, and there's a older guys get treated with respect. Some guys, by virtue of what they get paid, start. And so I don't know how a lot of that stuff works, but what I do know is Collins struggled to start last year. I don't think it was any secret. I think just the lineup itself, we talked about, it was clunky. But he got better as the year went on. And I think, the best version of John toward the end of the year was that guy was just a double machine. He was making open shots. So, yeah, we know what we have. You can talk about not knowing what you've got in some of those young guys. We know what we have in these veterans, but how they're sprinkled in, how they mix, that was something I watched all summer. Is there a trade that's possibly going to happen with those guys? But nothing was able to get worked out. So here they are. And you want veterans on your team, but these two veterans are unique. So it's going to be, when you're working on all that other stuff, how they fit, that is going to be a challenge for Will and the team to figure out how that's all going to mesh.
How do you think Mykhailiuk, Mills, and Eubanks fit in and what their roles are?
So Eubanks is a guy, they're just going to probably, the book on him, he just plays 100 miles an hour, plays really hard. He's, you can count on him. He's always in the right spot. So I think he'll be a guy that's just, not to use the term, but Majerus used to call guys blocker screeners, just guys you just throw out there and you know what you're going to get. Patty Mills has been playing so long, he's forgotten more than most guys know. As an aside, we had Patty Mills at the University of Utah on a visit, sitting in a hotel room with he got in the very night, that very night we were having dinner with him in his room with the coaching staff. And we had a player call while we were sitting there saying, "Hey, I want to take the last scholarship." And so we basically had to tell Patty, we don't have a scholarship for you. And Randy Bennett was ever so happy because he ended up at St. Mary's and the rest is history. But Patty Mills is, he's one of those guys you can put him in a game. He knows exactly how to handle the situation. Like you said, the rubber's a little bit worn, but that guy thinks the game's so great. So he'll be used to, in a way, I think, to mentor some of the young guys and then play some of those minutes as well. And you asked me about one other, and I can't. Oh, Mykhailiuk. I'm curious to see him. I like his spirit. I always liked him as a college player. Knockdown shooter, plays really hard. I think he knows how to play. So we'll just see how that all fits. You got Zhu Zhang hanging out there too, who's been around a little bit. So yeah, a lot of decisions to be made, and that's why you and I get to talk about it, and the coaches get to decide.
All right, Western Conference. Anything jump out to you? I have mine, but do you have anything that jumps? I'm leaving very open here. Anything that jumps out to you as the Western Conference sits right now as we head into this season from what's happened in the offseason?
I just think what I see is a deluge of really good teams for different reasons. The West has always been so tough. And I think we've got that again when you look at Oklahoma City and their upstart season last year, the way that they kind of putting things together. I love the moves they made. When you talk about team, adding 2 guys, Caruso is just made for them. I mean, 100% made for them. That's such a great move. So do they get tougher? Can they raise, get another level in the playoffs? Jokic, just can't get enough of him. The Timberwolves were right freaking on the cusp. So what do? Luka is Luka. The Grizzlies, what happens there, right? Now that they've gotten through the turmoil and some of the tumult, I think the Suns continue to just kind of be.
Mike Budenholzer's a pretty good coach.
No, he is. You're right. I guess that is the big difference there. So mystery. That's a mystery. We'll see how that plays out. I don't think the Spurs are going to be as bad as everybody thinks.
No, I think there's only 2 teams that are not going to be very good.
Portland.
Mm-hmm.
And
on that note, by the way, mine, and I'll talk more about it with the other guys, the Lakers, Warriors, and Clippers to me are just the biggest miss. I'm flabbergasted. I don't know what they were supposed to do. Well, I think the Warriors should have given up the house for Lauri, but I'm flabbergasted. They're projected to be 9th, 10th, and 12th in the West. Like with Kawhi Leonard, LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and Steph Curry. Like, what are we doing?
And LeBron Jr.
Well, of course. On that note, he's Tim Lacomb. Thank you very much for joining us. For those of you, thank you so much. Locked On NBA stays with you all season long, so that's your second listen if you want to take Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Josh Lloyd, the #1 fantasy show in the country, is up and running and rolling. So for on audio, that's a great stop for you next on Locked On Fantasy Basketball or Locked On NBA. And for video, we're going to send you the first ever 24/7 national sports channel, Locked On Sports Today.